Good morning. I'm Pete Baklinski with Campaign Life Coalition. Tomorrow, thousands of Canadians will come to Ottawa to rally on Parliament Hill. They will then march through the city streets. Some will be carrying signs like the ones you see behind us. Some will be praying. Some will be chanting slogans. Why have they come? Why do they rally and march in the public square? They come to stand in the place of the preborn child who cannot rally and cannot march. And it is not just one preborn child, but more than 4 million whose lives have been tragically snuffed out since abortion first became permitted in 1969. When many people hear the word abortion, they think about women's rights, the right to choose, and reproductive freedom. But what many forget about is the baby behind the abortion. From the moment of conception, this new life is fully human, just as human as you and me. He or she is an unrepeatable and entirely unique member of the human family who has come into existence to be loved and to love. As a full member of the human family, each is endowed with inalienable rights, first and foremost of which is the right to life. Abortion strips the preborn of their right to live. And this is why, year after year, thousands of Canadians come to our country's seat of power, here in Ottawa, to demand justice for the preborn child. And we will not stop coming. We will never give up. We will keep on fighting and never surrender until the laws of this country protect the preborn from the moment of their first existence. The theme for this year's 27th National March for Life is, I will never forget you. Indeed, so long as there are good men and women in this great land of ours who cherish that this country, as our charter states, was founded on the recognition of the supremacy of God, who value human life because it is created in the image of God, and to walk in the way of justice, these good men and women will honor and remember the preborn killed by abortion as the victims of the greatest of all Holocausts. These victims must never be forgotten. They were our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors, our fellow citizens on this earthly journey to the life to come. Their lives mattered. To forget them would mean that we have forgotten ourselves, what it means to live, what it means to be human. So we rally and march, remembering the victims of abortion, as we in the pro-life movement continue to fight for a day when the preborn are loved, valued, and protected from the moment of conception onwards. In today's press conference, I'm joined by a few of my colleagues who will be speaking about the anti-life priorities and policies of Prime Minister Trudeau and the Liberal NDP coalition government that are gutting our country of its future. First up is my colleague Josie Luetke, Director of Education and Advocacy, who will speak about the millions of dollars that this government has poured into increasing and expanding access to abortion. Josie.
Thanks, Pete. I'm here live in Niagara Falls. And before I get fact-checked, yes, it's chilly Parliament. Canada is the only democratic country in the world with zero protection for the freeborn. A woman can have an abortion at any point in pregnancy for any reason or no reason whatsoever. She can have as many abortions as she'd like, all funded by the taxpayer. But is this enough for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? Is abortion on demand, anytime, anywhere, enough? Apparently not. In addition to the millions we spend annually directly paying for the killing of preborn human beings, our government has committed $81 million over 6 years to increase access to sexual and reproductive health, including abortion. It is funneling money to pro-abortion organizations to promote abortion, to help women travel to get their abortion, and to train medical professionals on how to do the killing. And more babies will die. One of the projects that is being funded by the government is the It's My Choice website, which helps users decide which type of abortion, surgical or chemical, is right for them, as if there could be a right way to kill an innocent human being. The priorities of the Trudeau government are completely distorted. But is it enough that preborn babies in Canada are being targeted? Of course not. The Trudeau government is also spending $700 million per year on pushing sexual and reproductive health and rights, again, abortion, overseas, often in developing countries, in Africa, even though, by and large, Africans embrace children, reject abortion, and consider the Western imposition of it on them to be a form of ideological colonization. The policies of the Trudeau government are quite literally lethal. They're contributing to a culture of death, both here and abroad. We know that for every 4 babies that are being born, at least one is being killed by abortion. In 2022, which is the latest year for which we have stats, there were over 350,000 births, but approximately 100,000 abortions. And we wonder how it is that our fertility rate has dropped to critically low levels in Canada, 1.3 children per woman, which stresses the pension system, the healthcare system, the labor market, and immigration is only a band-aid that is not stopping the bleeding. This is what happens in a country where choosing death is deliberately made to be easier than choosing life. And in a situation where choosing life is becoming increasingly more difficult, as my colleague George will elaborate on, social supports and life-saving drugs could make a world of a difference for those who are struggling and suffering. But instead, our government has decided that free contraception is our most urgent need. Again, the policies and priorities of the Trudeau government are completely out of whack. They're backwards, they're regressive. But even if Justin Trudeau is intent on eliminating the lives of preborn children, there are those of us who refuse to abandon them, that have taken to heart the words, "I will never forget you." And we will never give up, and we're not going to stop until the injustice of abortion is ended. We see what's happening in the United States. Upon the overturn of Roe v. Wade, yes, the abortion debate is still contentious, but presently Supreme Court justices are considering reimposing restrictions on chemical abortion. Justices from Alabama recognize that early, very young embryos are children deserving of protection. So a culture of life is never out of reach. If we prioritize life and we implement life-affirming policies, then we can see a turnaround here in Canada too. We can see hope restored. And tomorrow's march will offer just a hint of that. And it will be a promise that in the end, life wins. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Josie. I'm now going to invite my colleague Jack Fonseca up and he will be speaking about the climate of censorship of the pro-life voice that has now been taking place within our country for some time. Jack?
Over the past few years, Canadians have witnessed a dramatic spike in state censorship laws which target so-called unacceptable views, to quote Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who is himself becoming known internationally as a totalitarian ruler. These censorship laws are springing up provincially and municipally and have the effect of erasing the constitutional right to freedom of expression and freedom of assembly for Canadians who believe in the right to life. The millions of us who believe that abortion is a form of child murder are being systematically stripped of the ability to advocate for the right to life of babies in the womb. We contend that Justin Trudeau, as the most pro-abortion Prime Minister in Canadian history, through his non-stop decade and longer of falsely promoting abortion access as some kind of right, is largely responsible for the sudden surge and anti-life censorship laws at the municipal and provincial level. Trudeau deliberately created an atmosphere among leftist politicians to allow them to feel absolutely unashamed in their promotion of child murder, and indeed to proudly champion it as progress. Trudeau opened the door, so to speak, and these lower-level politicians walked right through. For example, in Manitoba, the socialist NDP government has moved Bill 8 to criminalize peaceful pro-life expression and even silent prayer on every taxpayer-owned public sidewalk within a radius of 50 meters around every abortion facility in the province. Let's call it a no free speech bubble zone law. And with its passage, the right to protest, the right to free speech, the right to freedom of assembly will disappear in a dramatic violation of Canada's Constitution and Charter of Rights. Now just imagine the following scenario, which is very realistic. A little old Catholic grandma is praying the rosary silently on a public sidewalk outside an abortuary without uttering a single word. She's just praying her rosary. Keep in mind, of course, that as a taxpayer, she has the right to be on public property. But along come the police. They arrest her, and that little old grandma goes to prison. For what? For quietly praying without speaking a single word? Without any action at all that could be remotely considered violent or threatening? Is this justice? Is this a free country? No, it is not. But the bubble zone law, being considered by Manitoba, makes it illegal to commit, quote, any act of disapproval of abortion. And it's not just Manitoba. That province is following the lead of Newfoundland, Quebec, Ontario, Alberta, and Nova Scotia, who all passed similar no free speech zone legislation between 2016 to 2020. Now, do you notice that these tyrannical laws were all passed during the Prime Ministership of Justin Trudeau? Now, even cities are getting in on the censorship action. The cities of London, Ontario, and St. Catharines recently passed a bylaw to criminalize the delivery of pro-life flyers to homes. The city of Guelph just passed a ban on pro-life bus ads. And all of these cruel and dictatorial censorship laws have the same goal: to silence Canadians who are trying to defend the human rights of preborn children. The theme of tomorrow's 27th annual National March for Life is "I Will Never Forget You," a passage from chapter 49 of the prophet Isaiah, in which God promises he will never forget any human being he has created, and specifically mentioning those whom he formed in the womb and called by name. The establishment of no free speech zones and the restriction of right to life flyer distribution by provincial and municipal governments seeks to make society forget the child in the womb. But they will not succeed. As a pro-life movement, which is million strong, we repeat God's promise to every Canadian child in his or her mother's womb: I will never forget you. You may be voiceless, but we will be your voice. We will never stop until you are safe. And there are signs that these totalitarian attempts at strangling the voice of pro-life advocates will not succeed in the long term. For example, the city of St. Catharines has been sued in court by another pro-life group over its pro-life flyer distribution restriction. Even legal staff for the city of Toronto recently submitted to City Council a recommendation to abandon a municipal censorship bylaw proposal similar to that passed by London and St. Catharines. As Canada's most important human rights movement, we will continue being a voice for the voiceless, in spite of this Trudeau-inspired climate of censorship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. I'm now going to invite George Buscemi up, who is the president of Campaign Quebec V, our sister organization in Quebec, and he will be speaking about the rise of euthanasia deaths under the Prime Minister of Justin Trudeau. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Pete. Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you to address a grave issue: the practice of euthanasia under the guise of compassion. In Quebec, euthanasia now accounts for a staggering 6.6% of all deaths. This statistic is not just a number, it represents a shift in how we deal with the most vulnerable among us: the elderly, the disabled, and those in severe distress. Consider the heart-wrenching case of Quebecer Normand Meunier, a paraplegic who, after spending 96 hours on a stretcher in an emergency ward and developing severe bed sores because of that, chose euthanasia. This is where the so-called right to choose medical aid in dying truly leads to desperate and sad situations where suicide is considered the only bearable option. The current government, led by Prime Minister Trudeau, is creating a climate that not only permits, but subtly and overtly, I would say also, encourages the killing of our elders, our society's fonts of wisdom. From 2016 to the end of 2022, nearly 45,000 Canadians were euthanized, an increase that signifies our growing reliance on euthanasia as a so-called solution. More disturbingly, in 2022 alone, a significant number of individuals opted for medical assistance in dying due to psychological distress rather than terminal conditions. Over 17% felt isolated or lonely, and over 53% felt they had lost their dignity. This rising trend in euthanasia deaths, which has been consistent since the inception of MAID, raises profound ethical questions. We are indeed becoming comfortable with the idea of euthanasia as a normal part of healthcare. Our veterans who once fought for our freedoms are now being offered euthanasia as if it were just another service. In 2022, at least 4 veterans were suggested medical aid in dying when seeking support from Veterans Affairs. This is not only alarming, it is an affront to their service and to our humanity. We cannot and we will not forget the elderly and other vulnerable Canadians whose lives are threatened by these policies. We must stand against this tide and reaffirm our commitment to life, to dignity, and the true care our people deserve. Mesdames et messieurs, aujourd'hui je prends la parole pour parler d'une question grave qui touche à l'essence même de nos valeurs au Québec et au Canada. La pratique de l'euthanasie est présentée comme une forme de compassion. Au Québec, l'euthanasie représente maintenant 6,6% de tous les décès. Cette statistique n'est pas juste un nombre, elle reflète un changement dans notre manière de traiter les plus vulnérables parmi nous, les personnes âgées, les handicapés et ceux qui sont en grande détresse. Prenons le cas déchirant de Normand Meunier, un paraplégique qui, après avoir passé 96 heures sur une civière, dans un service d'urgence à Saint-Jérôme et développé de graves plaies de lit, a choisi l'euthanasie. Voilà où mène le soi-disant droit de choisir l'aide médicale à mourir à des situations désespérées et tristes où le suicide est considéré comme la seule option supportable. Le gouvernement actuel, dirigé par le premier ministre Trudeau, crée un climat qui non seulement permet, mais encourage l'élimination de nos aînés, les puits de sagesse de notre société. De 2016 à fin 2022, près de 45 000 Canadiens ont été euthanasiés, une augmentation qui signifie notre dépendance croissante à l'euthanasie comme prétendue solution, entre guillemets. Plus inquiétant encore, en 2022, un nombre significatif de personnes ont opté pour l'aide médicale à mourir en raison de détresse psychologique plutôt que de conditions terminales. Plus de 17 % se sentaient isolés ou seuls et plus de 53 % estimaient avoir perdu leur dignité. Cette tendance à la hausse des décès par euthanasie, qui est constante depuis la création de l'aide médicale à mourir, soulève de profondes questions éthiques. Nous sommes devenus à l'aise avec l'idée de l'euthanasie comme partie normale des soins de santé. Nos vétérans qui se sont battus pour nos libertés se voient maintenant offrir l'euthanasie comme s'il s'agissait d'un simple service. En 2022, au moins 4 vétérans se sont vus proposer l'aide médicale à mourir lorsqu'ils ont cherché un soutien auprès des anciens combattants. Cela n'est pas seulement alarmant, c'est un affront à leur service et à notre humanité. Nous ne pouvons pas et ne nous oublierons pas des personnes âgées et autres Canadiens vulnérables dont les vies sont menacées par ces politiques. Nous devons nous opposer à cette tendance et réaffirmer notre engagement envers la vie, la dignité et les véritables soins que nos concitoyens méritent. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much, George. I'm now going to invite up Ruth Robert, who is Campaign Life Coalition's Atlantic Coordinator, and she is going to speak about the good news of a closure of an abortion facility here in Canada on the East Coast. Ruth, thank you.
Yes, we do have good news in the recent closure of Clinic 554, a private abortion mill in Fredericton, New Brunswick. For years, Trudeau pressured the provincial government to fund private abortion mills by withholding federal funding for healthcare. In fact, Trudeau erroneously claimed the province would be losing millions of dollars, even though the actual number was later revealed to be closer to $150,000. These kinds of inaccuracies can only serve to show either his ignorance or his willingness to lie for the sake of achieving his ends through fear-mongering. In the face of this blatant bullying, CLC encouraged the local government to stand strong and asked our supporters in the area to do the same. Local pro-lifers and pro-life organizations not only encouraged their government to hold the line against Trudeau's murderous policies, they also continue to offer loving support to these young mothers and families in need. For those individuals that went through with abortion, information was also made available about post-abortion healing. Fortunately, the provincial government in New Brunswick did stand up to Trudeau. Today, private clinics continue to not receive public funding, although tragically, tax dollars do still pay for the killing of preborn children in public facilities like hospitals. Clinic 554, though, was forced to downsize and finally to shut its doors in February of this year. No more babies will be murdered there, proving that Trudeau's devotion to death does not have to dictate the policies of a province. Praise be to God.
you very much, Ruth. That concludes our press conference. Tomorrow is the National March for Life. We will be rallying here on the Hill at 12:30, and the march will begin at 1:30. We'll be joined by some phenomenal speakers here on the Hill, including former Planned Parenthood Clinic Director Abby Johnson, who's traveling from the U.S., as well as Sean Carney, the co-founder of 40 Days for Life, which also operates here in Canada to much success. And we look forward to seeing you here on the Hill. It's not supposed to be raining. It's going to be a lovely day. So please come out, and thank you very much.